And we're live. This is Literary Roadhouse. One short story once a week. I'm Anais.
I'm Gerald.
And I'm Rami.
And this week we're discussing The Swimmer by John Cheever. You should really read the story. It isn't very long, and we provide a link in the show notes. The Swimmer follows Nettie Merrill on a suburban journey that starts innocently enough. He wakes up a midsummer Sunday afternoon, having drunk too much, lounging at a neighbor's pool. He has an idea. He can swim across the county by going from yard to yard and swimming in his neighbors' pools one by one until he reaches home. As he passes through the neighbors' affluent homes, it's apparent that he is well regarded and part of the community. As the journey across pools progresses, the weather becomes cooler, as do the neighbors. And it is clear Ned has forgotten significant details of his neighbors' lives and even of his own. By the time he reaches home, it is cold outside, he is weak, and the house is abandoned and in disrepair.
Wow. Good summary.
Right. Good summary. Thanks. So what did you guys think of the story overall? Start with Gerald, like usual.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? It took me several readings to get into it. I think I've been reading too much sort of straight, sort of shallow fiction, if you like, recently. So I thought, what's this about? It just didn't make sense. And I think, what's going on? But then I began to understand it, and I liked it a lot. Yes, very much.
Rami?
Yeah, I didn't read it several times over, but in the story link that you had sent, they had a brief introduction about the author and kind of a synopsis of what to expect in the story. So that helped. And there's a lot written about this story. So I'm assuming it's used in teaching circles or something for students to read. So that also helps. But once I kind of understood what was happening, I liked it also.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. And I didn't read the intro at the beginning before I read the story, a clean slate, before then looking up what other people have said about it. What I thought was interesting is a lot of the things that other people have said about it don't all agree with each other. Like there's a baseline it agrees with, but then there's like all these different interpretations. And what I liked is the surrealism and how it kept me guessing. Like it was just the way that it unspooled. I was like, what? Like that feeling was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it's one of these stories where you assume if like I did, if it doesn't make much sense at the first, in the hands of a less skilled and less well-known author, you might think this makes no sense and move on. But you know it's worth carrying on with it and getting to grips with it because the results are there for you. The value is there for you.
Mm-hmm. So let's go right into what we think it's about. Rami, since you did quite a bit of research.
Well, no, I was gonna defer to you.
To me, no, Rami.
Well, no, because I mean there were some things that I think understandably I just had trouble picturing. So what does it mean? I at first, when you're swimming pool to pool, I thought, wait, are they referring to some kind of body of water that there's a pool running throughout and he's just gonna swim? But I think he literally swam from one person's house, like the pool of one person's residence, got out and went to another and just continued. And then obviously something else that was difficult to come to grips with was the passage of time and how that could be realistic, that so much time could pass. Or was he suffering from some kind of amnesia? And it's sort of like, what was that Leonardo DiCaprio movie called when he's in an insane asylum?
Oh, Shutter Island?
Yeah, Shutter Island, when he's like reenacting these events and but I mean, based on the neighbors' reactions, I don't know if that was the thing or he's just kind of like, this is like his routine and every day he's going to discover that the house is empty or something.
I think it's a surreal story, isn't it? So you probably shouldn't look to make too much sense out of what actually happens and what he's doing, but really the the underlying theme of the story, I think, is probably more important.
Yeah, and well, because the thing is, so Remy kind of touched on the two main things I found my research that people think this is about. So for me, it looked very clearly as a sort of surreal illusion as to sort of like just adult life, like adult married family, suburban life. Like throughout this trip, he's sort of following the arc of kind of like a married life, right? It starts out great. It's nice and sunny. You're well liked, things are going well. Then it starts to get a little bit cooler. He starts, running into people that he doesn't even really want to see. He like for me, when he goes to the Welchers home, and the pool's dried up, and it's like he has this sort of crisis, like, and that's kind of like at the midway point. So there's kind of like it just seems like an arc of like a marriage in which people are sort of apathetic, not paying attention, because he's not paying attention at any point. That's a theme that keeps coming up over and over and over. And by the end of it, the entire family unit has collapsed. He's had an affair. He's alone. He's old. He's cold, and it's winter. And he doesn't even know how he got here, because life just flew him by in the way that this afternoon flew him by. So that's the illusion that I think most people focus on and like. But then there's this other one that Remy came at, which is this dementia, Alzheimer's? Is this a disorder? Which is, I almost feel like that's like a more modern reading. I feel like that's very like the 2000s, because this was written in 1964. Not that people didn't discuss, Alzheimer's and dementia, but I feel like that knee jerk, like, is this a mental illness thing? It's because we talk about it more now than we used to, I think, right?
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think we, because there's more known about Alzheimer's, dementia, and mental health issues, that reading a story like this, which I think is essentially surreal, reading a story like this, you try and find explanations for everything, and you think, oh, maybe, as Rami alluded to, maybe he's in a mental health institution, or maybe this, maybe that, but I think you and that was my problem, because I was looking at the practicalities of swimming from pool to pool, and then I think you need to step back from that and just, if you like, just sort of appreciate the story as a whole, and what he's doing and what's happening to him as he's doing what he's doing, which is more the idea behind the story, I think, rather than the actual what he's doing and what's happening to him specifically.
Yeah, and I just had a thought as you were speaking, and then it went away because I started thinking about the nudists in the story. Just casually dropped in there, the old nudists. Yeah, and I think for me, the other thing is what I thought the story was about kept changing, which I think is what made it fun. Because in the beginning, when he's just like, oh, I'm going to follow the Lucinda River, he names it after his wife. He has like this game of pretend, and he starts talking about like his neighbors as like the natives with their hospitable customs that he has to handle with diplomacy. I thought it was going to be about just a guy who's bored with like the suburban cookie cutter life and just wants to go on an adventure. Like, I thought it was just like that primal call to like go out into the wild and feel like you're a part of, the earth, and that aspect of it's what I thought it was going to be about. And then no, it completely wasn't about that.
Yeah, he called himself an explorer at one point, didn't he? And he was, when he was going from pool to pool, he was having to go through hedges and at one point he had to cross this it's almost like a river, but it was the main road, and it was dangerous, and he got halfway, and so all this sort of stuff, and yeah, he was making his epic journey, which I thought was really well done.
Mm-hmm. And the fact he was so committed to it, because everyone's laughing at him as he's at the side of like a highway, and he could just turn back, but he doesn't. He's out there in his shorts. People are just seeing him half naked. And, there was that line where he thought, that basically like stubbornness is something that common sense would do away with. But in his case, he couldn't, even though something he had always believed, because he just felt like he had to complete this journey, which again, with the illusion aspect of it, it's like, you don't really have a choice, right? Like if this is an illusion for your adult, married, sort of oblivious kind of suburban life, you have to cross that route. You have to get to the other side, including the humiliations that come along the way. And I also thought it was interesting, and I don't know if Cheever did this on purpose, but as he got more and more middle-aged, just before he got sort of like a lot older, the neighbor's wealth started to go up, 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 and then dropped all of a sudden. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and they became less welcoming and more suspicious of him, and more antagonistic towards him too. And I thought that contrast from the start, is a sad story in some respects, but that contrast between the end and the beginning was so stark and so and probably quite lifelike in a way.
Yeah.
Was it just the neighbor's wealth that increased, or it seemed to me like he enjoyed some kind of higher social standing, but then, I don't know, due to something happening, he declined. And that's why the neighbors are acting more cold towards him and the bartender, I think, or so.
Good point.
Yeah, though I think these things go hand in hand, right? So I think if it's an allusion to the arc of an adult life, that's kind of like, not the very fulfilled one where people are impassioned and pay attention to the details, to sort of just, the sheeple type thing, the suburban sheeple life. So if you see it as an allusion to that, then these two things are inseparable. Yeah, he did lose wealth in his personal life over the arc of that, because that's something that tends to happen, right? As people tend to make more and more and more and more money until somehow just before retirement, they didn't plan well. They retired. It doesn't go too well towards the end because they didn't really, like that happens. So I feel like he himself had suffered personal humiliations. He himself had maybe suffered something at work, something to do with his income. There was the affair, and then that was mirrored, because right, this journey could have been plotted any way, but Cheever plotted it to sort of mirror the arc of his life.
Yeah, you think, and you wonder, as we're discussing it now, we wonder whether the arc of his life took a downturn around about the time of his affair and the ending of the affair, and all of a sudden from and it's it just I don't know, it in some respects you look at the start of it and you think, what a wonderful life, what a pleasant life that must be, but actually it's a fairly empty life. It's just people sitting around a pool drinking and having got drunk the night before and have hangovers, and they're drinking again, and so it's essentially an empty life, but outwardly successful and affluent, and then then it all changes for him.
And it's funny that you said that at the beginning you think, oh, isn't this wonderful? No, I've seen Stepford Wives. Listen, I am ready. When you see a perfect suburban setting in any work of fiction, on guard. So
yeah,
it's never like, and they all lived pleasant, happy lives, end. Yeah. But that's just me being trained as a reader. It's not that it wasn't depicted in a pleasant way. Although I did think it was funny. My very first note was, because he, when he was first just thinking, oh, you could make a stream connecting all the pools. I thought it was just like a thought exercise. But then he was like, I'm going to do it. Yeah. My first note is just LOL. He's doing it.
Yeah. In a way, it sounds, because people do stupid things like that these days, don't they? They look for new challenges in life, and they do ultra marathons and multiple marathons day after day, and always sort of trying to do something extra and something special and go further. And so yeah, maybe he was realizing that this life was empty for him, and maybe he needed to do something like that to make it more fulfilling.
And I think it's no coincidence, he needs something to do more fulfilling. And the thing is very nature-based, very primal, right? He's not trying to invent something. He's, going through the bushes.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah.
So what did you guys think of the writing, the language?
It was my sort of language. It was not
British.
British. No,
No, it was good. Yeah. Continue.
It was straightforward. It was measured. It was illustrative. It's just the sort of writing I like, because you can read it without stopping and thinking, oh, that's a posh word, or that's, what's he mean by that? You just sort of read it, and what matters is the overall story, rather than, so you're not tripped up by the language and the actual writing.
Mm-hmm.
With the exception for me, I guess, of just a few words I was unfamiliar with and I had to look up.
Like
vestiarium.
Oh,
Vestiarium.
Yeah,
And there was another one that was made a note of it. Stertorously.
Oh, yeah.
Surreptitiously?
No. He was breathing, and now he was breathing deeply, stertorously, as if he could gulp into his lungs the components of that moment. I think that just means like very deep gasps of breath.
Yeah.
Anyway, but the writing was overall good.
Oh, I see it now, the word. Yeah. I actually, one thing I really liked was his control of tone. I feel like and mood, like because this is a story that, okay, so when you make an illusion this depressing, it can very easily feel a little depressing or maudlin. And this is something we've talked about with other short stories where the author is very skilled. He somehow still kept it light up until he gets home. He still keeps it light. Like there's still, how do they do that? Like that's always what impresses me, is the controlling tone and mood. I think because of my own writing, I struggle with that sometimes. I'm like, I'm like, this got maudlin fast. Yeah. How did that happen? And I think part of it, what I'm starting to notice, is really skilled authors, the way that they just like kind of weave a metaphor that commands tone through a sentence without saying this is like this is the same as this. Right. Just say it.
Yeah.
So that's their skill, right? And I think I started to notice that that's what Cheever was doing here, is he would use these metaphors that would set the tone for him very effectively. And that really impressed me. I should have highlighted, but I was reading on my phone.
Yeah, and I think also because he's you're saying it doesn't get maudlin towards the end, and I think because he creates questions in your own mind, because you don't really understand the practicalities of what the character is doing, and all the time you're questioning yourself as you're reading it. You're saying, why is he doing this, and why is it suddenly, why are the constellations not right, and why passage of time. So you're sort of resolving all these clues as you're going along, and as you say, right at the end when he gets to his own house, you go, oh, it's yeah. There's a sort of the kicker really for the story is just, he's unaware that what's happened to him and his family and his lifestyle. So during this whole journey for him, and it's a journey without shouting journey. It's it's just because it's unusual, and it's swinging from pool to pool, and practically you can think, yeah, it's feasible, and that's sort of interesting, but I think the sort of theme and the underlying meaning of the story is sort of quite well hidden underneath the until you finish the story, and then when you look back at it and you think, what was all that about? And then you have to sort of analyze it. Maybe that's just me.
No, I think that's true. And that also brings me to something else that's impressive, is when you can create mystery without frustrating a reader. You know how it's very easy to have like too many questions. The reader's like, okay, you're just the reader feels gamed, feels like, all right, you're just doing this on purpose to be like, oh, nothing makes sense, you're on shaky ground. I never felt that way here, right?
No.
Yeah, which again is a skill. Like I feel like these are things that, so yeah, his writing's very straightforward, but I think what I've started to notice the more and more we read, what's only been more than 2 years now on this podcast, is like the really good writers know how to put questions without frustrating you, answer them at just the right time, because there's nothing more frustrating than when like you already knew 20 pages ago and they're still like, what could it be? You're like, no. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I just appreciated all of that. Sort of my second read through. The first time I was just enjoying it as a reader. The second time analyzing it for the podcast, I was just like, why am I not frustrated by the fact that like he has no idea that the Welchers aren't home, that they moved out, right? Things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's really skillfully done, and as you say, it's at no time because you sort of, because the pacing was so quick too, that you were sort of along with him, and oh, this pool's empty, so what is he going to do now, and then he's starting to get tired, and oh, what's going to happen there. So you're sort of reading the story and you're going along with the main character, and then you sort of think, actually, what's happening and what is the arc here?
Mm-hmm. And also, as I read it, I kept revising my theory, which goes back to what you were saying. You're so engaged in figuring out the mystery. So the first time when I thought, oh, this is some sort of like suburban man break, he needs to go on a safari, so he's doing it in his mind, and he doesn't know that the Welch are there. I'm like, oh, this is a commentary on how he's like oblivious and doesn't actually form friendships with the people around him. Then it keeps going. I'm like, wait, that's not it at all. Like,
very good.
yeah.
And
I
it's
really
funny, yeah. And the reaction of the neighbours is the change of that you know, they're so friendly towards him at the start, and outwardly, you know, I can't remember the word, but yeah, they're just sort of suspicious of him and angry towards him, and don't want him around later on. That's very well done too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and towards the end, everyone assumes he wants money.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it seems like he's asked them before.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, one of them did say, "You're not going to get any more money out of me."
Yeah,
and
that
when
was the mistress.
Mm-hmm. And when he's at the bartender who's like giving him a bit of attitude, and then the hostess says that line, she's talking about him, right? And I thought it was funny. Like, these people are so like affluent that her line is like, oh yeah, all they have left is income. Like, they got no real assets. They have no wealth, you know, no property.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty funny. All they have is income.
Yeah.
And also going to the mistress, how casual the way that he thought about the mistress and the affair sort of spoke also to sort of like that sort of oblivious, blind way. He was sort of just, it was almost like, oh, I'm at that stage in my life where I'm supposed to have a mistress, right? Like, it didn't seem like this was like some passionate thing he pursued. It was just like another apathetic, blind thing that he did.
Yeah. Yeah, just reading that little bit now, that there's so many bits that when you sort of understand more of the story, that you go back and read, and you think, this is so well done, so carefully and subtly done. Very good. Love it.
Remy seems deep in thought.
Yeah.
I've as you were talking, both you and Gerald, I'm trying to think of an appropriate rating that I'd be comfortable with, and I was oscillating between a 5 and 5.5, but it's still a little too confusing for my liking. Just, I mean, this whole thing, could there be other Oh, I'm sure there could, but do you know of any other interpretations than this kind of like metaphor on life?
Well, like we said in the beginning, the mental illness thing, dementia, Alzheimer's, a man who...
Yeah, but that's not that satisfying either, I guess.
It's less satisfying, yeah. Because if it...
That's a more rational explanation, isn't it? Rather than the theme of the story.
And then in its rationality, there's like no like moral in the old-timey tense. Like if it's about Alzheimer's, then it's, oh, isn't that terrible? Alzheimer's is a terrible thing.
Yeah.
End of point. We all agree. You know what I mean? Like it it doesn't have that sort of message, doesn't make you reflect, because it's not like Alzheimer's is going to happen or it isn't going to happen, right? Like it's something you don't really have a lot of control over, and you can learn about it to be more sympathetic to people that have it, but it's not satisfying, because what are you going to do with that, right?
Yeah. It's just a plain ordinary da 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 story that doesn't have any deeper meaning.
Yeah. It's almost like a PSA for being sympathetic to people with Alzheimer's. Like that's what that would feel like, right? Like, be kind.
Yeah, that's true.
I will be kind.
This is what it's like.
Yeah. So, Rami, why are you unsatisfied with the allusion to just like
Because I don't think that this is representative of a typical life either. And there are what you said about how it didn't raise too many questions. If that were the interpret, there would be a lot of questions, like what happened. First there's a part of me that just wants to know what happened to him, what happened to his family.
Right, but I think the lack of detail is intentional, because so you're saying you don't think this is a typical life. I think it's something, I think it's more like, it's almost like a cautionary tale in a way. Like it's a little bit like, that's not even the right word. It's more like we already have this concept in our culture of like the Western consumerist suburban, have the nice house, the kids, blah blah blah, like that isn't that like American Beauty, right? Like this is like a trope. This is like an archetype that we already have, and this is another way to look at that, to examine it, and then be like, no, don't do that. Which isn't saying everyone lives this way. And I think what it's also trying to say is don't live this way.
Yeah.
It's unsatisfying.
But it seems to me that it's not this kind of normal distribution arc where it seems that it was going one way, one trajectory, and then there was some climax or some major event that kind of disturbed the normal way things are supposed to be, and that's the part that I'm missing. And then it led to this unfortunate outcome at the end.
Does it matter though? I think it's I don't think it's important for the story, in my opinion, to know what happened, but just for the reader to be aware that this can happen. So and that initial, I mean, it's amazing that it was written so long ago, but that initial idea, that initial image of sitting around the pool drinking and drinking the night before is such an aspirational image for most Western cultures, I think, to be affluent, to have the property, to have a pool, and to be able to sit around with friends and drinking, and people would think, yeah, that's what I want. That's what I'm aiming for, and then it's as Annie says, it's more of perhaps a cautionary tale to show that things can happen, and maybe I'm going to go back and read it again. Maybe there's something in the progression in the initial half to 2/3 where that ended up with him having the affair, and I'm pretty certain that the affair is probably the thing that really made things turn bad for him.
Yeah, I really think so. I think the lack of detail is sort of like, it doesn't matter what the specific drama is. It's just, if you just sort of follow this path, have these hedonistic goals, and don't really pay attention, because he's not paying attention. He's just drifting in and out of people's yards, and everyone's like, hi, bye, right? Like, and everyone's just drinking all the time. I mean, this is a Sunday, and everyone's just like, we drank last night, we're going to keep drinking now. So I think as soon as you tie it down to a very specific thing, then you're doing a disservice to the point you're trying to make as an author when it's this type of story, because then it's like, oh, well, of course, then maybe just don't gamble away. Like, if you, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're like, oh, if you make it a specific thing, well, of course, you should have gambled your house. You know what I mean? Yeah. You can't make it specific. You just have to be like, don't be oblivious. Don't be apathetic.
Yeah. So I guess I would have liked a more concrete lesson to learn. If it is in fact a cautionary tale, I don't know if, just don't live carefree is kind of like enough for me.
Yeah. Rabbit's like, listen, I already know that. Yeah. Okay. So is there anything else you want to say? Without it's going to be a shorter episode, but I think we've milked it. What are my notes?
Yeah, I think so. My rating has increased.
Yeah?
Oh, yes.
Good. Oh, what's the storm? The storm on the horizon, the thing you should have seen coming, right? That's the classic motif of a storm.
I suspect so, and maybe that was the turning point. I don't know, because after that it became colder, and he became more aware of the cold.
Didn't the storm happen? Where it didn't happen at the Welchers' house. So the Welchers is the only pool that's dried up. Is that the midlife crisis? That's when the storm hits. So it doesn't matter what it is. He's in their gazebo, or maybe it was somebody else's gazebo where he takes shelter from the storm.
Levy's.
Levy's. I don't know when the Levy's happened.
Yeah.
Maybe just before.
Maybe.
Yeah, so that was just before the dried up pool. So the storm happened just before the crisis. Remember that's the one point, isn't it at the Welchers where that's the how it's all dried up?
No, because Levy's, he swam in the pool and then helped himself to drinks. There was no one around, and there were drinks around again. Alcohol. Then the storm. Then he went to the Welchers pool after the storm.
So that's what I'm saying. If the storm is like the turbulent period, and then afterwards he you know what I'm saying? Like I think the timing of that is related.
Yeah, Welch's pool was dry, and he had to cross the Lindley's horse riding ring, but it was overgrown. There were no horses, so all of a sudden, after that storm, everything's the breaching this chain of water disappointed him, and he felt like some explorer who seeks a torrential headwater and finds a dead stream. So it's like at the storm is when things go wrong for him.
Yeah. Story's very clever. Oh yeah, it's very good story. Yeah. Well, I'm ready to rate.
Go for it.
Yep.
I think it's no surprise I'm giving it a 6.
Hey.
It's coming in with a 6, staying with a 6.
I came in with a 5. I crept up to a 5.5, and then thought, this is a damn good story. 6 for me.
All right, I'll try to balance you two out, and I'll stay at a 5.
Okay,
still good.
Because you wanted that specific. What happened?
Yeah.
That's okay.
All right. So this is our 99th episode. We're not playing a game because we already know what we're doing for our 100th episode celebration. Woo! So what we're going to do is next week, we're going to reread the first story we ever did on this podcast, which was The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. So that should be exciting.
Yeah, we've got to listen to that podcast again, haven't we, to see what we talked about last time.
I was just going to say, I don't want to listen to our first podcast.
Oh, really? I'm going to listen. It'll just be interesting.
I expect to cringe at everything I say.
Not true. Wow, 100 episodes. Wow.
Yeah.
What's our story arc? Are there any dried up pools?
Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of stories that we did in the beginning that I know now, thinking back on them. Like there's the one story that I'm like, I did you wrong, was Edmondson by Alice Munro. I was too young. I was too naive. I was wrong. I was wrong.
I wonder whether some of the magical realism, whether I've mellowed in over the time, and whether I'd be more accepting towards magical realism than I was at the time, other than saying just rubbish, makes no sense.
Early on, I think you didn't like the magic chalk. Maybe that's your Edmondson.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't remember. Yeah, there's others that I remember not liking at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, be good.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's it, unless we have any more celebratory things to say about the 100th episode.
No.
We need Maya for it. So we're going to have to celebrate
definitely.
next week.
Yeah. Oh, for
Yeah.
sure.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Short but good.
Are you doing an outro?
Oh, see,
You've
I
written
felt
it.
something was off.
something
You've written
is
it, and I
off.
read it.
Something is off. There is an
Yeah.
outro.
Yeah.
It's because I missed
Right.
my cue, which is the game. Okay.
Right.
All right. So go reread The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. Listen to our first episode ever. Cringe with us. And then once you're done doing all of that, or before, tell us how many pools you need to swim across to get home in the comments section at literaryroadhouse.com. And on your intrepid suburban river safari, be sure to make scenic stops at iTunes, Stitcher, and Spreaker. Leave a comment, and the pools that lie ahead in your journey will remain warm for a little longer. Having come to the end of our own pool tour, we found our podcast house is in need of maintenance. Support all our shows, including the Literary Roadhouse Book Club and the Bradbury Challenge, at patreon.com/Literary Roadhouse. And as always, share this podcast with the old rich nudists in your county. Until next time, read a good story.
Hey. Wait.